Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we will uncover the sustainability trends shaping 2025 and what food businesses need to know going into the new year. And I'm Hannah Musi, Head of Marketing here at Klimato, and I'll be your host today. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Missy Lowe, our Head of Customer Success. And she brings deep insights into the sustainability industry and the real life challenges food businesses actually face. So in other words, she's a perfect mix of experiences to cover this topic.
Thanks, Anna. I'm really excited to dive into some key sustainability trends and provide some practical strategies to help food businesses stay ahead of the curve in 2025.
That sounds great, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. But before we dive in, let's go over some quick housekeeping rules. So this session will be recorded, and we'll share the recording with you all afterwards. And you can submit questions anytime using the Q&A function down in the right corner. And we'll address your questions during the Q&A section in the end. So we have a packed and valuable agenda in front of us today. So we are seeing a lot of interesting trends right now. The sustainability industry is really booming, as you all know. So on today's menu, we will only cover three key topics. First of all, the continued rise of the plant-based market. And the second trend we will cover is the regulatory shifts you need to know about going into the new year. And the third is the new carbon tracking technologies that we're seeing. So what do you say, Missy? Let's jump into the first trend, the rise of the plant-based market. So Missy, could you tell us a little bit more about this trend?
Yes, so the plant-based offerings have grown steadily over the last few years, and many food businesses have already started implementing more plant-based options as a KPI. And by 2025, they really will be a central focus for food businesses. And as you can see on the graph, over the last 5 years, the global plant-based food market grew from 43 billion in 2020 to 52 billion in 2023. And it's projected to reach 78 billion this year. And that steady upward trend shows that the plant-based market really isn't just a fleeting trend, it's here to stay.
Yeah, and that is quite a growing trend in just 5 short years. So what would you say, why is it accelerating so quickly?
It's a good question. So I would say it's driven both by consumer demand and businesses. So consumers are becoming more and more aware of how their choices impact the environment. And eating plant-based is one of the most impactful differences an individual can make. And food businesses are, of course, noticing this and pivoting their offering and messaging to incorporate that. Additionally, businesses have also started setting environmental targets, and implementing more plant-based options is a very quick and easy way to achieve carbon reductions. So I would say that both of these is what is fueling the growth of that market.
Oh, so it's really a win-win situation here. So consumers are making choices for sustainability purposes, and businesses are responding to meet those demands while also hitting their environmental targets. So it sounds like the plant-based market could just continue to grow. But are there any benefits or ways for food businesses to really leverage this trend?
Yes, so for businesses, aside from meeting consumer demand that I mentioned, it's also an easy way to reduce emissions and costs and position themselves as an environmentally conscious brand. Plant-based ingredients are generally less expensive than animal-based products, and these options can boost margins for businesses when they're positioned strategically. And we can go into that a bit later. Offering plant-based menus also caters towards a growing number of environmentally aware consumers. And this is especially true in the B2B space. So many of the caterers that we work with have been asked by their clients to to increase sustainable, vegetarian and vegan options. And one way that they are trying to highlight this and leverage the climate-friendly aspect of these plant-based options and drive consumers in that direction even more is to use carbon labels to communicate the reduced impact of the plant-based alternative versus the animal product. So using that carbon data to create credibility, and that can also really generate engagement amongst consumers and chefs.
Yeah, that's really so many great points, Missy. So there seems to be a lot of benefits, and plant-based options can benefit businesses. And I found it particularly interesting when you mentioned the labeling, and that can drive engagement. So I was just wondering if you could unpack that a bit more. Like, how do carbon labels actually encourage interaction and interest?
Yeah, so it might seem like a gimmick, but actually it really does work. So firstly, the A to E climate rating in recipe tools helps chefs know exactly where they're at with their recipe. You can't try and reduce if you don't know what your starting point is. So it gives them a point from which to improve their recipes. And we've actually seen it create some positive competitive spirit amongst some of the chefs we work with. And on the consumer side, I've got an example here, a graph of a hotel that we work with who reduced their emissions by 10% in just 2 months. And that was only by adding labels. So to be clear, they didn't change their menu in this period. Just by adding the labels, they had that immediate, very quick reduction. And they've been pushing forward on that ever since. In contract catering, those results can actually be even higher because employees eat there every day, see the labels every day, and start to understand what they mean. We've actually done surveys both in the hotel area and the catering area, and 74% of guests said that the labels positively impacted their meal choice. So that shows us that consumers are really beginning to get a lot more engaged on the subject, and it's proof that labeling is really good at nudging consumer choices and can form a central part of your carbon reduction strategy.
Yeah, that's actually really cool that something as simple as a label can drive such a big change in consumer choices. And but Missy, do you have any like final tips you want to share on what businesses should be doing to kind of leverage all of these plant-based market trends and set themselves up for success?
Yes, so here are a couple ones. So there's no one solution or one silver bullet. You've got to try different things, as there still is a lot of skepticism towards plant-based alternatives. So I try out different things. So first and foremost, you've got to find the right supplier and find an alternative that tastes good so that people actually keep coming back for more. If it doesn't taste good, you're not going to sell it. I would then work with that supplier to try an activation or a pop-up, ask the supplier to come in for a day, hand out free samples. Everyone loves free food. And then on a more concrete side, I would try and set yourself a target percentage of plant versus meat offerings. For example, 60-40 of your menu, 60 animal, 40 plant, or even look at a 5, 10, 15% increase of your plant-based offering with each menu or each year. Then this might seem like a soft thing, but menu design is also really important. If you don't make the meal sound appealing, or if you put it to the bottom of the menu, you're almost guaranteeing that people aren't going to choose it. Similarly, if you're looking at a buffet area, either for conferences or canteen style areas, try do rotating stations. So generally people will sort of walk into a cafeteria and go to the same station every time if they know that that's where the meat is, for example. If you switch that around, people might end up going to a place, seeing something interesting and trying that out. Same thing with buffets. I would intersperse the meat options with the plant-based options so that people sort of pile on a little bit of different things to their plates and try different things out. And lastly, and really most importantly, is the communication strategy. Make it clear why you're doing this. develop a common strategy highlighting the carbon reduction of plant-based meals. People tend to be a lot more engaged when the focus is sustainability versus their own health and you telling them what they should be doing with their body. We actually tried this out with a caterer where we worked with their in-house comms team to coordinate a comms relaunch. In that case, we did it to align with World Earth Day, but you can also just do it to align with the beginning of a menu cycle. And we went out via their company letter, their payment app, and on Slack. And the result was a steep carbon reduction over the next 2 months, honestly, more than I had expected. And since then, that has also maintained. The comms team also got feedback via the newsletter that everyone was really excited that this was happening and liked that they were focusing on this. So I really would encourage you to try a little bit more and engage with people on that.
Yeah, I think those are really good insights. And I like that you emphasize the why behind it. So people truly understand like the impact and they stay engaged and are on board with a bigger picture. And as well as the point that you're raising about setting clear targets for plant-based offerings, I think that's really key. Yeah. And another big thing that's happening in 2025 that you cannot have missed is the new frameworks that we're facing, like the CSRD and the TCFD. And they will start to come into effect for some businesses, which will require reporting on carbon emissions already now. So for those of us less familiar with these new regulations, Missy, could you kind of give me a quick overview?
Yes, of course. So very briefly, the CSRD is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It's an EU regulation that requires businesses to disclose their full environmental impact. The directive will be implemented starting 2025 for large businesses in the EU or those with subsidiaries in the EU. So it affects more people than just the EU itself. And with full rollout for businesses of all sizes by 2028. So some runway for the smaller businesses to get prepared. Companies have to comply with the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and in the UK, the equivalent is the TCFD. Both of these cover environmental, social, and corporate governance topics. And amongst other things, it requires businesses to report on their full scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions.
Yeah, that's a really nice overview. Thank you for that. But do you think, Missy, that certain parts of these regulations will be or have a bigger impact on food businesses than others? Or what are your thoughts on that?
For sure. So when you're looking at scope 1, 2, and 3, for most businesses, and particularly for food businesses, scope 3 will be the biggest. And within that, so your food and beverage procurement comes under scope 3, category 1, purchased goods and services. For food businesses, scope 3 accounts for up to 95% of their total scope 1 and 3 emissions. And typically 70% of that is food. So having proper oversight of and really good data on your food emissions, given that it's 70% of your total emissions, really is essential.
Yeah, that's really quite a lot. But could you also help me understand like why it's so important for food businesses, especially to start understanding this already now?
Yeah, so even if your business isn't big enough to need to report yet, the information can take some time to collect. So it really is something that you want to try and get ahead of. So lots of smaller businesses, for example, are on our lowest plan at Klimato, just to get used to collecting and understanding this kind of data, to get the ball rolling without the pressure of reporting happening in the next half year. And these businesses don't have to report on scope 3, they're just trying to get ahead of it. So it's important for a few very simple reasons. For target setting and making informed strategic decisions. So hopefully your goal is also to reduce emissions, but to do that, you want to set targets either with Klimato or with SBTi or other frameworks. And if you really want to make sure that you're focusing on what matters, you need a granular picture of all of your emission hotspots and the most accurate data on upstream emissions. Reporting will also be key for businesses to maintain credibility and meet stakeholder expectations. It's also very important for investors. The TCFD in the UK requires you to disclose accurate Scope 3 emissions, and investors are increasingly demanding that. And next, obviously, brand reputation. It's important for transparency and positioning yourself as a modern and eco-friendly business, because this is becoming something that so many businesses are doing these days. So you kind of have to do it just to keep up with everyone as well. And finally, you can also find money-saving opportunities if you have the right kind of data.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different factors here, like setting targets, enhancing brand reputation, and also, of course, uncovering cost-saving opportunities. And it seems like understanding these like emissions data can really bring a lot of benefits beyond just reporting. And it's not just about compliance, right? So could there be other advantages as well?
Yes, so I've actually prepared an example of a customer. Clients who are analyzing their reporting processes can often find cost-saving opportunities that they didn't see. So it really is a win-win of regulatory compliance and operational efficiency. This could be coordinating your supply deliveries or improving the quality of your data. So here is actually an example of a customer who was doing their Scope 3 food calculations. And like most businesses, they only had spend-based data readily available. So basically only knew what they were spending on their food as opposed to the weight that they were buying or the amount that they were buying. So they worked really hard to get their volume-based purchasing data. And once they'd done that, they realized that they were actually buying 3 times more burger patties than buns. To be clear, they don't serve burgers with double patties, I asked. So this was just a weird discrepancy that was happening across hundreds of branches in the UK, and they only really noticed this once they got that granular data for all of their branches combined. And they're now trying to get to the bottom of this and have uncovered a very easy carbon saving and also cost saving around operational efficiency. And here's a graph of their projected carbon reduction based on making that change, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's a really great example to just, show the importance of really knowing your data, but also in turn your emissions. So with this in mind, like what are some actions food businesses can take to kind of tackle these regulations and get ahead?
Yeah, so the most important thing is to understand what regulations will affect you and when. So that could be CSRD or TCFD that we've spoken about, also British labelling standards. So this is something that we can also support with, and we obviously stay on top of because we're a food business. The second thing I would say is stay ahead of this rather than doing it all when you've got no time at all at the end and it's your first time doing this. You don't want to do it at the 11th hour. Also make sure that you get all the support you can get. And finally, work with a provider who is agile and aware of trends.
Yeah, so to kind of sum this up, it's really all about understanding the regulations ahead of time and also finding the right partners to kind of help you stay ahead of the curve and kind of position yourself for success, I would say. And speaking about staying ahead, the next exciting trend that we are seeing is the rise of carbon tracking technologies. So now with machine learning and AI, food businesses are really able to measure emissions more accurately than ever before. And do you, Missy, have any examples of like how businesses are actually using this to their advantage?
Yes, so as we know, as we've already discussed, calculating food emissions is very important for food businesses, but it can be complex and expensive if you go through a consultancy. But if you're using tech, the idea is that it makes it quick and affordable. You ideally want to measure emissions a few times throughout the year, so you can assess how effective your strategies are. So automation really is the key to doing this in an affordable and effective way. To give you an example, we worked with a caterer who didn't have budget to do this through a consultancy. Instead, they uploaded their procurement data sheet to our platform, matched their food line items in our database, and immediately got a report of their total emissions, as well as an analysis of hotspots. The report identified that dairy was a hotspot because of high volumes of milk in coffees in offices, which they previously hadn't really considered. So they immediately implemented plant-based options. And next quarter, they uploaded their data. All the matching was already done as the tech is continuously learning. And they immediately saw the results of that change, which was an 8% decrease. And now moving forward, they upload their data every quarter in no time, and they can quickly see the impact of their strategies. And if it's working and if it isn't, they can pivot very quickly.
Yeah, that's really important and can really show how tech can make emissions tracking both affordable but also much more efficient, like you're saying, and being able to kind of see it in real time to also be able to pivot is such a huge advantage. But are there any other ways like businesses can leverage tech, especially to make tracking and reducing emissions even easier?
Yes, so another way that technology supports carbon reduction is through recipe optimization. You can tweak recipes and then make reductions and just small changes without compromising or changing the flavor profile of that dish very much. So the idea behind the recipe tool is that chefs can experiment with lower impacting ingredients. We also have a consultancy-based recipe analysis service if that's of interest. But most exciting is that we're currently developing automated ingredient swap suggestions in the app. So it'll be much quicker and easier to achieve those reductions without having to think about it so much. If you're looking at recipes to tweak, my recommendation would be to start looking at your highest selling recipes, as these small changes will have a significant cumulative impact on your overall numbers.
Yeah, so this is also a really good example of how you can use tech to kind of optimize recipes without sacrificing quality, of course. But do you have any other tips, Missy, on how businesses actually, like how they can go about it to start using this tech?
Yeah, so I mean, my advice is the same as it would be for any technology, is always start with why you're doing this. What problem are you trying to solve? And then how can you use tech to make it easier? So finding the right partner for that. I would also really, really stress is use all the support available. It's easy to get overwhelmed with a new project, but all tech platforms come with manuals, with customer success managers and support whose job it literally is to make sure you get the most out of the tech. So use them, schedule sessions with them. They're there for a reason. And if you prefer not to talk to someone, there's also always demo videos and help centers. So you can use that as an option as well. And then my final tip with any project, particularly if it's tech and you're not that used to using tech, is start small and then roll out. It's better to start small than not at all. And that way you can test it out and make sure it's perfect or near perfect before rolling out. So with hotel customers, for example, I generally recommend starting in one area, be that the a la carte space or the breakfast space, and then doing each bit at a time. Same with caterers. We generally recommend starting with the hot lunch mains, and then you can roll out and start looking at deli items and other areas or breakfast if that's involved as well.
Yeah, and I really love that approach of starting with the why before you find out the how you can use the technology for it, because then you really make sure that the use of tech is focused and tailored to your specific company and your needs. So thank you for that, Missy. And now we've heard so many great insights from you regarding these 3 new trends. But what would you say are the key takeaways overall for businesses to kind of stay on top of these?
So a quick summary, because I realize I've been talking for a while, and it's always good to have a summary at the end. So the first trend we mentioned is plant-based. So food businesses really should embrace the growing plant-based market and set implementation targets and communicate why you're doing this. That's the best way to get started there. The second is work with agile experts to understand how regulations will affect your business well ahead of time. You don't want to be starting this a month before all of the reports are due. And then thirdly, really leverage AI for cheap and quick reporting as well as reductions. If you're analyzing your procurement hotspots or just a 5% reduction on a popular dish, both of these can have huge annual carbon savings.
Yeah. And I think that with those words, we wrap up the session. But of course, we have 3 minutes left for the Q&A. But thank you so much, Missy, for sharing all of those valuable insights. It's really clear that staying on top of these trends is key for success in the coming years. So should we see if we have gotten any questions? Here is one question. How often should we measure Scope 3 data?
So I would say start off by doing it annually for most businesses. So look at doing a baseline for 2023 and 2024. So, where you're starting out. And then going forwards, for larger businesses, you want to do it a little bit more frequently. That allows you to see more quickly what difference the changes that you're making have, rather than waiting to the end of the year to see what's happening. So for 2025, maybe you want to try and do it every half year or every quarter year.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think we have time for one last question here. How can we engage suppliers to provide better data?
It's a good question. I know everyone's really focusing on supplier engagement right now. And I think the key thing, obviously, is collaboration. Start with very clear guidelines on what data you need from them and offer support where needed. That's also something that we can help with. Some suppliers already have this data, which will make it easier, but others will need a lot of help getting started. So the Klimato app also includes a spreadsheet and tools to make that supplier engagement easier, so you know exactly which information those suppliers need to give you.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. I think that we have to wrap up this session, and we've gotten a lot of questions, so we will make sure to try to reach out to you. And also, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to either me or Missy or anyone else within the Klimato team. So thank you everyone for joining, and we will make sure to send out the recording and follow-up resources soon. Yes. So thank you. Missy, do you have any last words?
No, I think I covered everything. Thank you so much to everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.